Let's face it, there are a lot of things that we can't control. A more urgent task comes up, your internet connection decides to not cooperate at the last minute, or your meeting gets delayed to another day, thus giving you another thing to worry about with your schedule. Things like these unexpectedly happen. So now what? Instead of beating yourself up and telling yourself, oh, you didn't do well, or you did not tick off all your to-dos for the day, it's time that you learn how to adapt and problem solve. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the challenges of keeping a schedule and how to adapt when things don't go according to plan. Welcome to Productively Creative, a 5-part series where I share tips and ideas on how to stay productive without having to compromise your creativity. If you want to know more about how I assess or troubleshoot delayed tasks, then keep watching this video. Please consider subscribing to my channel as well so that you can get notified when the next episode drops. Give it a like and a thumbs up and share this to your friends who need advice on this topic. So there are 3 factors to consider when you're planning ahead for something. That's time, energy, and resources. So either of these factors, you can overestimate and underestimate them. It's totally fine, but this is also the key for you to figure out so that you don't get overwhelmed. And I know this is hard to comprehend, but everything is fixable. I like to think of troubleshooting as some sort of like problem solving for your to-do list, and we can definitely make that work. So let's get started. Time. Underestimating or overestimating the amount of time you work on something is very, very common. Don't worry, it happens to everyone, even me. It's always because we expect that the rate of work and the amount of work and the time it takes to do the work will all like match together seamlessly. But sometimes, a lot of factors come in the way and you're not able to do it. Or for example, you are working on a big project and you decide to put 2 hours on it and you decide that it's not enough. So this is why I keep telling you that being productive and applying your creative work to productivity does take a lot of experimentation, and it's definitely a work in progress. So here are 3 tips on how to take control of your time. The first one is, of course, to break each task into smaller tasks. Go micromanaging all the way here. For example, if I tell you I'm going to be editing a video, that's just a big task. There are a lot of other things that are in factor there. So if I'm going to be editing a video for an hour, I'm going to give myself 30 minutes to look through all the footage and edit which ones need to be cut. And then the next 30 minutes can be for editing purposes only. So in some way, I am giving myself a lot of wiggle room in case like one task doesn't seem to be taking 30 minutes, then I could move on to the next task. So really, time management is also about figuring out each specific task that needs to be done. The second one is to prepare the tools and materials you already have nearby. When you go to a kitchen and the chefs always tell you to have like the mise en place where all your ingredients are already there, this concept also applies to making work. For example, for me, I try to put my laptop always here or all of the art materials I need the day before, because that way I am sort of conditioning myself to get into the work immediately. Sometimes when I'm doing writing, for example, I write in the mornings, I put my iPad and keyboard right here on my desk. That way I get to work immediately once I step out of my bed, basically. And of course, you have to prioritize tasks that are time sensitive. For example, if you have a deadline that is due by noon, of course, you have to put that task ahead of schedule. And I want you to remember that there are a lot of things that we can't control when it comes to our schedule. You have bosses, you have people who need a specific thing from you immediately. I get this a lot because I work with a lot of printers and suppliers, and I always have to set deadlines in order for me to submit things on time. And if things don't go according to plan, you can always switch around. What I like to do is I subtly switch around my morning and afternoon tasks depending on what needs to be finished for the day. For example, if someone is going to be delivering an item to me, I have to make sure that I am free by noon, so I have to finish all my work by noon so I can accommodate whatever deliveries are coming my way. So it's a simple act of really monitoring and being more intentional about where you strategically place your time, and that way it's going to be easier for you in the long run to manage it. Now let's talk about energy. So everyone is probably familiar with time management, but have you heard about energy management? Also, I want to quickly touch on here that when you're faced with a new project or a new deadline, you tend to have a regular case of the imposter syndrome. My favorite. So when that happens, you always think like, oh, maybe I could do something else. You tend to procrastinate. You tend to distract yourself, read a book, do something else, watch Netflix. I want you to remember that that energy needs to be conserved and you need to spend it on what matters most. So here are 3 tips on how you can take control of your energy. First one, don't overdo your to-do list. Let's normalize unfinished to-do lists actually, because when you make a to-do list, which is why I actually prefer time blocking, but if you're pretty much used to a to-do list, so be it. So when you write a to-do list, you have like 5 items you have to finish. You have to factor in every single task, as I mentioned earlier, and at the same time, try to figure out how much time it will take for each task. So let's say you have an 8-hour workday and you don't finish all the to-dos. Don't beat yourself up. Tomorrow is another day. Don't suffer. I don't like the term suffering, especially when it comes to work. I always feel like sometimes I'm a slave to my own job. But at the same time, I'm the one imposing all these to-dos on this day. I'm pretty sure there's going to be like 1 or 2 tasks that are not urgent that can be moved to the second day. The second one is to assess which tasks take up most of your creativity. I want you to center on that, especially if you're working on administrative tasks. For example, for me, I work on Patreon, shop, community, and YouTube. For the shop, I think a lot of the work goes into admin work. For example, admin work can be packing, writing invoices, working on the order confirmations with my assistant, and this one takes a lot of time. So I try to put a mark as to when I only work on admin work. For example, if I'm packing orders, I used to pack for the whole day. It gets really tiring because you're factoring in physical labor. And when you're working on creative projects, it's the other way around. You're using a lot of brain energy, like mental energy, to create designs and really focus on the work. So try to factor in these things when you're working on something, because it really, really helps you figure out which one you can manage with. For example, I find that I like to pack later in the afternoon because it's a time of the day where I don't want to be active thinking about ideas, because my peak hours or golden hours, as Jocelyn K. Glai calls it, is from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. So those are my peak creativity hours. I don't really like to work on anything very deep into creativity after. So that way, I try to pack in the afternoon so it's easier for me to sort of manage things around. The last thing is to check in with yourself regularly. I really, really recommend this because when you feel burnt out, I highly recommend you to rest. I think this is something that we tend to overlook. We've lived in a hustle culture where everyone's like, work hard, work hard, work hard so that good things will come. Or like glamorizing the idea that like you're self-employed, you're doing things, DIY everything. I get it, I've been there, but I think it's time to know when you need help or when you need to take a rest. Now, the last one is resources. There are a lot of external resources that happen in a workday, and these are things that you definitely cannot control. I know when you're making plans, you always want to be in control. Actually, the reason why we make plans is so that we can be more in control of our schedule. But we always cannot assume that it will 100% work out. I think this is also one of the things that people fear when they're making plans, because I'm making plans and it doesn't turn out the way I wanted. Why did I even bother making plans? But as an anxiety-filled person like me, I think the idea of making plans really helps you put things into perspective and also guides you. As I mentioned, it's like a guiding star. It's really, really important to have that, especially if you want to work towards fulfilling your goals for the next month or year. So, when I run a shop, there are a lot of things that get delayed. For example, when I order washi tapes from overseas, sometimes they get stuck in customs. It's gonna take more like 1 week for me to like go to the office and claim it. Or when you're a freelancer, your internet connection decides to not cooperate because of the weather or your line got caught. What are the things that you can do in order for you to move forward once these situations happen? It is very important also to have breathing room and flexibility when things don't go according to what you envision from your plans. So here are some tips that I highly recommend in order to take control of your resources. So the first tip I highly recommend is to revisit your schedule. Which are things that you can move around within that schedule. I'm gonna tell you a very concrete example. So one afternoon, I was recording class for Patreon, so I'm using my mic, I was all set up, and then it started raining for 2 straight hours. It wasn't even like the light rain, it was really hard rain. It was dark and gray. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do for the next 2 hours? Instead of saying like, I'm going to slack off for the next 2 hours, I decided to go back to admin work and I did like answer some Patreon inquiries. I also checked my email, and after 2 hours, once the rain cleared, I was able to go back to work. So these are things that can be definitely changed depending on what happens in your situation. And I think also that time my internet was very slow, so I couldn't also record properly. So in some way, I managed to get the workday done and move over to the next day. The second one is it doesn't hurt to have a backup plan. If you have a plan A, you can always have a plan B, plan C, plan D until plan Z, or anyway, plan B is always fine. So, for example, if your shop items don't get delivered within today and your shop release is the next day, you can always move things around. You know, it's not something that you have to beat yourself up and say like, oh my gosh, I'm a failure, because it's not your fault that things get delayed. Another thing is, for example, if you have weak internet connection, what are you gonna do? You can always ask your boss if you can submit the following day. It doesn't hurt to ask, especially if you want people to adjust to you. This is something I've learned the hard way because I've always been on the fence about making myself look weak when I talk to other people. Like, I remember clearly, I was supposed to have a meeting with a group because I work on brand strategy for a company. And then I told the boss, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think I can function today because my migraine has been like on 100% with my brain. And she said, no, it's okay, we can move the next day. You know, you don't really have to stay strong because these are things that you can't control. You know, I get a headache. I did take medicine to nurse it back to health, but it took like 2 days. So I can't really function well, and you know, in that way your work also doesn't get sacrificed. My last tip is to be kinder to yourself when things don't go according to plan. Remember, resources are not fully in your control, so I don't want you to tell yourself that you did not do enough because you can only do so much. I also want you to remember that your future self will thank you for treating you this way. I have been very, very harsh on myself, and it was always because I couldn't do X much in a day or I couldn't finish everything in a week. But you know, at the end of the day, this is also something that I have to take note of. I am not Superwoman that I can do everything. And I want to share with you a quote that I got from the Ask Polly column. So it says, stop trying to fix everything and savor the imperfection of this day. I feel like I have to letter it somewhere and put it on my wall because I really need to remember that. I always want to expect that whatever I plan for a day will come out perfect. Like, I do everything according to plan, 9 to 10, 10 to 12, finish the workday, do my yoga, wind down. But it doesn't really work out that way. That is the surprise of life, you know? Things happen, things change, and you have to be able to troubleshoot. And I don't think it just happens with schedules. It happens with travels. It happens with everything that's ongoing in your life. You know, you may be looking for an apartment, the next day it's sold, what are you gonna do? You know, things like these are very, very common, and I do hope you learn to take heart into knowing how to manage them better. The first one, look at your current schedule. Is there something that you can move around, or there is like a window time? Don't fill it up. Actually, just, you know, leave it there, because if things happen, you can definitely troubleshoot and work along the way. Next, assess which tasks take up most of your creativity. So, for example, do you like having a routine, a writing routine, a drawing routine, or do you like to add variety in every day? Or do you want to be like me, where I do like specific tasks in certain days? Try to analyze this and sort of figure out where creativity is also the strongest in a day, so that way you'll be able to make better plans. Last, I want you to list down the external resources that may affect things. For example, the weather, your internet connection, supplier deliveries. In case these things don't go according to plan, do you have a backup plan or contingency plan to work through them? If not, try to think of ways on how you can solve them in case things go bad. Again, your time, energy, and resources are all manageable. Remember to be kinder to yourself, and that small progress is still progress. In the last episode of Productively Creative next week, we touch on the idea of work-life balance, setting boundaries, very important, and how to prioritize yourself over your work. So it's going to be a lot of mindset work, and I do hope you check it out. I will link down the whole playlist down below if you want to check out the previous episodes of Productively Creative. And thank you so much for watching this video. I do hope you also picked up a thing or two on how to be more mindful about tracking and troubleshooting your schedule. Our art club at Patreon is always open for new members if you're looking for accountability or friends to help you on your productivity and creativity journey. That's at patreon.com/abc. Your support also helps fund this channel and create content like this. Thank you again for watching, and do consider subscribing to my channel. It's ABC, and also you can check out my Instagram at ABC, my shop at shopabc, and also our community where we share ideas and inspiration for your creative journey. It's at alwaysbecreating.art. And I'll see you on the next video. Take care always, and always be creating. Bye!